Welcome, viewers, listeners. So glad to have you here with us for the Embodied Educator podcast. And today's guest is someone who's been shaping the global conversation around embodiment for over 2 decades, and someone who has the guts to host the biggest event around embodiment worldwide with over 500,000 people and 1,000 speakers. And he must be a little bit crazy. I got to discover his craziness, but also his courage, curiosity, cursing, commitment, and capacity to translate embodied concept to boots on the ground, real work situations. So receiving an invitation from you, Mark, was awesome and a gift for me. So I feel very welcoming and excited to have you here with us. So Mark Walsh, welcome on the Embodied Educator podcast.
Pleasure. Nice to see you again, Liz.
Oh, lovely. So let's just dive right in. I hope I mentioned the biggest thing you've done, and we'll get through some more accomplishment maybe later in the conversation, but that's just it. I always start with this one. Who's the most important teacher in the way you're serving the world today? As we're talking to teachers, educators, who's...
Okay. Either my mother or Paul Linden. So, I mean, as we're keeping it, gotta credit your mom, haven't you? My mom took me to like Israel and India when I was 15, 16. She was a Catholic nun before she stopped doing that. So she was an influence. But my biggest influence was a guy called Paul Linden, who's my main mentor. I think he really taught me the importance of what I'd now call centering. A really rational, non-woo-woo approach to embodiment. Very logical guy. He's actually Asperger's, so he's got this very logical way of looking at the world, which helped cut through a lot of the nonsense out there, which has become kind of something I'm known for, I guess, now. It's kind of sort of no bullshit approach. And also just a very trauma sensitive. So he works with traumatized children primarily. So there's a great care in what he does. And this the importance of being loving above all else, I think. Like that's the sort of what I got from Paul was just he's a very loving man as well as a very sort of rigorous and logical brain.
Ooh, interesting. Yeah. So let's dive a little bit more into embodiment then, because you've spent over 20 plus years in the field, and I've been taught by you. That's where
Liz, I'm feeling old today. I woke up feeling really old. My first university friend was talking about retiring today, and another university friend was talking about her kids getting married, and I was like, oh my God, I'm getting old.
Yeah.
So it adds up, doesn't it? It flies by. I used to be the young enfant terrible of the sort of embodiment world, and now I'm the man, I'm the establishment. So it's like, how did that happen?
Oh my goodness. I know. I had a speech for my dad the other day because he retired. And I also was on the stage realizing, okay, he's getting older, but I'm also getting older. It's like, okay, we're now shifting towards the head of the family, with work, because work is very established. Yeah. Well, anyway, you got people out of their heads into their bodies, including me. And let's just put the question like this. What the hell is embodiment for you? Can you just help unpack it for the audience? We've been diving in from different fields, but yours is broad.
The subjective aspect of the body.
Yes.
The body relates to who we are as people, as opposed to the body as an object. It can be viewed as a field of study with a number of kind of topics within it, or arts within it, like martial arts, dance forms, meditative forms, etc. And it can also be viewed as a type of intelligence. So you can look at it as for a skill set lens. So I think like anything interesting, like, I don't know, love or culture or anything that is interesting can be looked at through multiple perspectives. So depending on who I'm talking to and what we're doing, I might look at it through any one of those perspectives. But the key idea is the body is more than a brain taxi. The body is a key part of who we are as people.
Yeah, not walking, talking question marks. So if we put it in the classroom, the setting of teacher and students and learning, you're also an educator, but
sure. As third generation educator, actually, my grandmother, my parents, and myself.
Oh, really? Yeah.
It's really deep in the blood to be teaching. I said to my girlfriend this morning, I said, I said, what am I really good at? I was feeling a bit discouraged, and I was listening to someone very clever on YouTube who's much more intelligent than me. And I think I'm not really an intellectual. She said, Mark, you're a teacher. That's your gift. You teach. You've always taught. You're a good teacher. That's really how I see myself. So it's really nice to be on a podcast that focuses on education.
Yeah. What do you think embodiment changes if you bring that bring it, well, you say it's a skill set, right? If you bring it to the classroom, what opens up when you're working from that perspective, from that point of view?
Yeah, sure. Let's take it back a step. So there's a fundamental misunderstanding in Western culture as to what learning is. So if we're educators, we're interested in learning, right?
Yes, definitely.
But yeah, because that's our field, how to help people learn. So our culture focuses on learning about. So I don't know how it is in Dutch, but in English, we have this one verb, to learn, that actually covers very different things. So like I know a bit about the Netherlands, for example, right? But that's not the same as being Dutch or even speaking Dutch, right? These are different, or Frisian, let's be inclusive, or a few other languages.
Yes, I've lived in Friesland.
It's the closest to English, I believe. So the idea of learning is sort of misunderstood and implicit. So if we're going to be teachers, first of all, we need to have a better understanding of what learning is.
Yes.
I mean, you learn from the teacher. So when you mentioned Paul, my mentor, Paul Linder, my primary mentor, I had others, but primary one, I'm learning as much from who he is than simply some clever stuff he told me.
Yeah, right.
Right. So the being that someone is, I think, is a very key thing. That's really what teaches. It's more than just a medium that someone learns. It is how someone learns. There's a few other pieces there that we could add for educators. I think the importance of co-regulation, of nervous system health, the importance of regulating and how that impacts learning, how you inspire people, that happens through the body. You know, if you imagine I'm sure everyone had a school teacher who was just boring and they didn't have an enthusiasm for the topic, enthusiasm from thumos, the Greek, like heart of spiritedness. This is embodied phenomena. So if we want to be effective as educators, we need to understand embodiment.
Yes.
Simple as that, really. Like there's no such thing as an effective disembodied educator. It's nonsense. Like in any depth sense, right? It's have issues with e-learning and different kinds of things. It's like, Zoom has its place, it has advantages, disadvantages, but if there isn't a sense of embodiment, your chances of being affected as a teacher are very low. Even if you don't understand, say, the jargon, the nomenclature. Some teachers will talk about the vibe was just off in class today, or, I need to connect with the students. This is all, I just didn't really have chemistry with my learning partner, with my co-teacher, This is all embodied phenomenon they're talking about. They just don't necessarily have the slight geekery of language that I've spent a career developing.
Yeah, exactly. And it's in the end, I think the sparkle eyes, the moment where you see the aha, which is on the embodied level. And I just want to go back to a moment because you said who he is really, or who he, she, them, they are as educators. That is where the biggest transmission is in teaching, in the learning space. What is it that you do or cultivate to help that for yourself? Because if you do it for yourself, that actually might be the biggest gift in the classroom to show up there, right?
Sure. So education traditionally in the West was considered more a matter of character formation than knowledge acquisition. So now the knowledge acquisition across the West has gone down tremendously. It would have, a couple of hundred years ago, it would have been very normal for a scholar at Oxford to sort of speak Greek and Latin, and so there was a greater knowledge acquisition. We are in a dark age, essentially, in many ways. Part of that, though, is that we've lost the idea of character formation. So we live in a sort of postmodern, extremely liberal, not just in the sense of left politics, but in the sense of everything since the 16th century, which essentially has got rid of the good, the true, and the beautiful. So I'm really panning out here. So in terms of what this means is classical education concerned those three things, including the good. So for a Victorian, for example, the idea of character development was a very normal thing. This is why all the sports were developed in the UK schooling system. Modern sports we play as character schooling, in the same way as the samurai would have understood that. The samurai didn't do the martial arts to fight; they did the martial arts for character development, because they realized once they realized oh, you develop someone, This is through these martial arts. This is why they stopped the gun being introduced. It was partly because it was a sort of threat to the ruling class, but it was also because they understood that you could train in the gun quite quickly without a lot of character development, whereas the sword or the bow required character development. So for the ancient Greeks, for the Victorians, and these are, for the samurai, the idea of education as character development, i.e., moral education, how to be a better person, how to develop virtue, arete, the Greeks would say. This is absolutely the foundation of Western education. But as we've sort of got rid of the idea of being a good person, which of course is ridiculous, it's impossible, but we've increasingly, you see that I was in like a kindergarten the other day. I was having a 12-step meeting. I go to Alcoholics Anonymous, and there was one in the kindergarten. It was really cute. There's all these rules on the rule, don't do this, and this is bad.
Yeah.
But we sort of get rid of that after a very young age now. We think we're sort of somehow too good for that. So I certainly think, character development is embodied, right? Like this is, and you could be old-fashioned about this. You say it's very character forming to be playing football in the rain, But I think there are more intelligent modern versions of that are necessary for us to be truly holistic educators, rather than simply trying to give information, which frankly, ChatGPT can do a lot better than you or I.
Shifting, right? Yeah. And could you say more about that? How would that look like? What would you add or do or to practice that character?
Well, there's many mechanisms for character development. You asked me, like, personal practices for me over the years, everything from yoga to conscious dance, lots of Aikido. I've just was weightlifting this morning. That's, for me, that's explicitly a practice, not just of exercise. Of course, you exercise, right?
Yeah,
But that's just the low level of the body. It's not the body as a mechanism for growth. But also part of weightlifting for me is character development. I'm building certain virtues, even if it's just determination or, even incredibly simple things like, I'm going to the gym whether I feel like it or not, like reliability, right? Like basic virtues.
Showing up.
I put my weights away when I'm in the gym because I'm practicing consideration to other people in the gym. There's all sorts of virtues that could be practiced. But certainly the martial arts, yoga, conscious dance, there's this classic forms of embodied development. So one is learning certain virtues, but also one is directly taking on a certain embodiment. I'll give you an example of this. So I formed a charity in Ukraine, working with trauma work, delivering aid to Ukraine, and doing work with trauma education in Ukraine.
Mm-hmm.
But it was in the beginning of the war, and we were on the ground in Ukraine, and it was quite scary. And I was with an Aikido friend of mine who was a Polish guy who was driving me there, and he speaks Polish, which is similar to Ukrainian, so it was a good person to have around. And we both made the connection that the training we had in the dojo gave us the backbone, the courage, the resilience to do this very difficult project. It was very clear that we developed a certain set of skills as Aikido students, which we were using in this very practical. And we actually both sent a message to our deceased Aikido teacher's son to thank him and his family, like for what we, to say, hey, this is you, your dad would be so proud. This is William Smith, another mentor of mine. Like he would be so proud of what we're doing, and we couldn't have done it without him, even though we had that education 10 years ago. It stayed with us. Does that make sense as an example? So it's
yeah, it does. And I think I'm just linking it to all the listeners, they're thinking about their classroom, because it's still a traditional setup, right? Where you have your group and you have your 30 or 100 sometimes. I mean, I have a background in higher education, so sometimes 150. I'm just thinking, like, how could that look like, and should we have maybe regular practices of, like you're mentioning, the dojo? Because one of the practices I took on while I was a student of yours, because we needed a separate practice from the one we had, right? To practice a virtue.
Yeah, I encourage students to develop their embodiment by taking on a new practice. Yeah.
Exactly. So I took Aikido, and that had like the relationship element of water, but then also it's a defense sport, right? Or
it added an aspect to your embodiment, even though you'd done other things previously. You're a mature student, you know yourself, but there's always another sort of bit of range we can build through different practice.
Exactly. And the building range concept, I love it. So I'm like just looking at the whole idea, the concept sometimes of education. So if you would rebuild the education from nowadays, with the TikTok brain and stuff, what is something you would put in there with your embodiment tools? Because you have the biggest tool set, I would say, in the world. That's what I love so much of being a student and in your community.
Yeah, I mean, I have a breadth and I have a way to a system to integrate all the different things that are out there because we live in a sort of postmodern, confusing time where there's a lot of possibility and you can be doing, we were doing a breath class last night and I'm at the gym this morning. We might be at yin yoga on Wednesday. There's so many possibilities. You do need some system to understand them. I mean, I think it's a big question, like what would I do with education, right? I mean, let's just look at what education really is. We're inheriting, as I understand it, a sort of Prussian model of education, which was designed to produce soldiers and office workers, bureaucrats. So the other thing education is, one is it's a training in conformity. The other thing that it is, it's a way for wealthy people to justify their power. So we could look at it through almost like a Marxist lens. And, people say, Oxford graduate. And it's like, okay, but the reason you got into Oxford is you had a tutor and you went to a certain school. So it's really just a way for powerful people to justify their ongoing power, really. So it's all of those things. And it is genuinely a way to be educated. So it's not that we have to say one of those lenses is, it's a way to tell people to conform, to sit still, to train them in a certain obedience, let's say. And it's a way to justify power and its education. It's very difficult to hold all of those things at once, right? Like you get the anarchists saying it's just one of them and the conservatives saying it's just another. So that's first of all, I'd say let's be honest about what we're doing in schools. It's not just one thing. It's not just education. If education's in there, like on a good day, but it's not one thing. Certainly, I think the modern PE system could be adapted to a more Budo model, like the Japanese model of physical education, which they all in kids in school in Japan still do judo and kendo. And if they're young ladies who are very posh, they might do archery or something. Is it Aikido? No, Naginata, the posh girls do. So they have different versions of it in Japanese schools. So I think it is possible to combine a sort of physical education system with a character growth methodology, which remember, the Greeks did this, the Victorians do this, the Japanese and Koreans still do this. This is not a weird idea. This is very common historically and globally. So I think what is now called PE could be extended to be a bit more interesting. And I think all teachers having a sense of trauma awareness, all teachers having a sense of nervous system health, co-regulation, that's just basic knowledge. There's sort of no excuse for not knowing that.
Exactly.
You can get a free education in a weekend on YouTube that I had to travel the world to get, So I feel like that should just be basic stuff.
So true. Yeah. And maybe let's zoom into that part a bit because you already mentioned working in trauma or in war zones with a lot of trauma and traumatized people. And in our classrooms, I also noticed that there is a lot of trauma coming into the classroom, and educators sometimes don't know what to do, how to approach that, how to provide. I always hate the word safe space, but a place where everybody is seen and heard and break through them.
Well, an ethical boundaried space, certainly. I mean, this safe space idea, I mean, you definitely don't want education to be a safe space because learning is always dangerous.
Exactly.
Learning is always a threat to your ego and yourself. So this sort of liberal American idea of a safe space, I would like to immediately strangle that to death. But certainly a space where people can learn includes a safe enough, let's say, right?
Yeah, exactly.
But also dangerous enough. It's like what makes a man hot or a good date. Like a hot man is dangerous as well as safe, right? Like he's a little bit bad boy as well as protective and good boy, right? Like every woman in the world knows
I would
this.
agree. I would definitely.
Yeah, you would. I see you smiling. I see you smiling. So this is basic. This is also like on what makes good play. Like, if I play with my nephew, I pretend to chop him up with a chainsaw and he runs away. And then, like I'm not like terrifying him too much, but there's an appropriate amount of terror, So it's like, like you pretend to be a dinosaur and, run on all fours after my knees. Like this is also just human learning is always this up and down regulatory space. Now, we are traumatized populations exist around the world. I've worked with a lot of them, like in the slums of Brazil and Ethiopia. And it's very difficult for people to learn when they're in a strong state of fight, flight, arousal because you're interested in survival. Like we in the Ukraine when we did the training in bomb shelters mostly because we're constantly getting rocket attacked. We'd have to spend 2 hours a day doing self-regulation and co-regulation practices just to keep people in a learning mode. And eventually I went, this is ridiculous. Let's do the trainings in Poland. It's much better to put people on the train and actually get them out of that literally dangerous space.
Yeah.
It's another reason I don't like the term safe space, because it's really degrading for people in
Yeah.
actually dangerous places. Let's reserve the term for people who are, getting bombed, which sadly, and it's
Yeah.
just so much easier to educate people when they're, not physically under threat, when their basic needs are met. I mean, if a tiger was in the room now, I wouldn't be thinking, oh, what am I learning from Liz in this interview? I'd be thinking, get out the room, right? Like it's
Right.
just
Yeah.
like
Yeah.
emergency mode, yeah.
Mhm.
The other thing is we're in the West, we are importing en masse people from the third world who are often coming with pretty wrecked nervous systems. So, and I certainly don't blame any family who are running from Syria. But if you're in a classroom and all of a sudden there's a bunch of Syrian kids who are, come, or they were just born of Syrian parents who were, dysregulated and then passed that on intergenerationally. I mean, that's going to be a very different classroom. So let's say you're in a Swedish classroom and there's a bunch of kids from the Middle East in there now. The other thing is, and this isn't very comfortable for liberal listeners, I know, but multicultural societies are dysregulatory. So the most
Say it
regulated
again. You're so fast.
multicultural societies are dysregulatory.
Yeah. Yeah.
So
Yeah.
we are comfortable around our own tribe. We are most at home. Look, for example, I'm an immigrant. I live abroad in Slovenia, and there's a mild dysregulation every time I go to the shops and buy a drink, because there's a sort of disconnect with the nuance, with the facial
Yeah.
expressions. Sometimes like there's sort of a bit more East European Slavic here, even though it's technically Central Europe, and their sort of shut down facial expressions may sort of make me, oh, is this person friendly? Or my girlfriend was complaining that one of our friends never asked questions about her, and she was taking this as a sort of sign that this person wasn't interested. But then it's just not part of Slovenian culture. People are quite private. They think it's rude to ask too many questions about you. I mean, even the Netherlands, which is like super close culturally to the UK, one of the most, we are cousins. We are so close genetically, culturally.
Mhm.
Even there, I've done a lot of business there, and I found like at times I was like, well, that's rude, you know. So how
The
much
Dutch are
more?
rude.
We'll say again.
But the Dutch are rude.
Yeah, yeah. Or they'd say, well, the English, they're funny, but they're arrogant, like there'd be a slight, so there's always this slight dysregulation, or
Yeah.
like gender relations are slightly
Yeah.
different. So the embodiment is different, right? I always say I can spot a Dutch woman because she's standing with her feet wider than her man, right? So it's like the different embodiments that people have there too. And that's
Ooh,
in cultures that are very similar. So the UK and the Netherlands, we are really brothers. We're very
of
close
course, they're still
genetically.
the
Germanic
scale is way
people, long
wider.
shared history, a lot of trading
Yeah.
together.
Yeah.
How much more so someone from Afghanistan or Sudan? And I've spent time around the world, so this isn't coming from a point of ignorance. I've
No, no,
lived in
no. The
multiple
culture map, I think,
countries.
is really interesting too. A book
So
like
we are
to
we are
yeah.
dysregulated by mass migration in Europe currently, and that's very different in a society like I was just in Czechia, where they have like pretty much everyone's Czech. There's a shared history, there's a shared religion, there's a shared language, and there's a coherence in that which really helps keep people safe. And that is the norm through global history, right? Like what we're
Yeah.
doing now is pretty unusual. And it doesn't seem to be working, frankly. Even Angela Merkel says it's not working, and she pretty much started it. So yeah, I think that's another aspect we've got on for educators, which is tricky now.
Yes.
Diversity is not our strength. Diversity is our nervous system dysregulation. And that doesn't mean we have to be mean to anyone or blame anyone. As I said, I'm from a migrant family. I'm a migrant in Slovenia. I have sympathy. And I probably know more about many of these migrant cultures than people who are sort of for some reason wanting it en masse. So I think that's a factor. Our disconnection from nature is a factor, and spiritually as well. I'm not sure a secular society, including a secular education, really works. I think we need something bigger to gather around. Like, what are we educating people for the sake of in a
Hmm.
society? Like, just a materialistic, secular society that says, well, we get education so we can get a good job, so we can get lots of money. I mean, really, is that a good enough thing to
Yeah.
gather around? This
Fair enough.
idea of we live in a world that has what's called the meaning crisis, and that is that disconnection is related to disembodiment. So I sometimes
Mhm.
call this the tetrarchy model of disconnection from self, disconnection from culture, disconnection from nature, and disconnecting from higher power, meaning, or spirit. So there's four
Mhm.
disconnections that are all interrelated, and all four of those will be making it difficult for teachers.
Yeah, definitely. And is it maybe already time to address maybe some kind of a practice to help. I'm linking it to this 4-layer model that can help on some of those layers to just find a way into a practice of cultivating a culture of more embodiment to hold the dysregulation, to hold the tension, or to, I don't know, is that, I'm thinking operational language already, talking to you. Yeah, I'm so like, operational languages.
Say again, one more time.
Oh yeah, I'm sorry. I put in a remark like I had to think of operational language, asking a question towards you. Just okay. My study came back. Now, to find a practice, because you addressed the 4 layers of where the disembodiment disconnects to the self. You
4
said
layers of disconnection.
Yeah.
Practice at the end, just to kind of complete, I think. But for now, so let's talk about each of those, and later on I can lead a practice to really help people reconnect with those. So you need some kind of way to get back in your body, right? Like otherwise iPhones are going to take your attention away from your body.
Yeah.
You need some kind of an awareness-based practice. Yoga, weightlifting, martial arts, some kind of embodied movement practice. You need some kind of co-regulatory practice. And that could be just having great relationships, parenting in a certain way. And then there's more formal practices, like speaking to the founder of Acro Yoga a few days ago, Jason Nemo, that's a co-regulatory practice. Mm-hmm. Some kind of nature connection practice. Like I spend a couple of hours every day in nature. Yeah. Sometimes just sitting by the river. I do my coaching calls, walking around the park. I was walking in the mountain yesterday near my house. And we need some kind of theological practice, some kind of a connection to spirituality. And that's going to be different for different people. It might look like a formal, going to church, kind of a formal practice. It might look like something more individualized than that. So,
how does it look for you? Do you have a spiritual practice?
Yeah, I mean, I meditate and I go to church. So I come from a Catholic background, and I've always liked being in churches. So for me, sitting quietly in churches, praying as well as meditating, it's something I don't really teach because I'm not expert in it, and I feel like it's quite a personal matter.
Yeah.
When you go to like Alcoholics Anonymous, they say you need a higher power, and it can be anything as long as it's not you.
Okay.
So we have to sort of I talk about centering a lot, but this is in a way we have to. Our culture's narcissistic. Our culture is the most narcissistic culture perhaps that's ever lived. It says the center of the universe is you, and you're so incredibly special. It's always the iPhone, right? It might as well be called the ego phone. Instead, I would say, we have to decenter ourselves around service. So for some people, the idea of God is too much of a stretch. I have pagan friends who have gods instead of a God. For some reason, that feels easier for many modern people. The challenge we have is that we're all dirty, disgusting moderns who have been raised in a kind of secular, materialistic paradigm. So and that's weird. Like, that's not most of human history. Most of human history was animist, and then religious after that. So, for example, a medieval person or an indigenous person would find our materialistic worldview very strange and incredibly unhealthy. Yeah. And the conclusion I've come to is it just doesn't work. Like, society's in a period of absolute collapse right now as a result of our materialism. And I think we're coming to the end of a period of materialism. And I'm not the first one to work this out. As I said, like Alcoholics Anonymous worked this out in the 1930s when they realized that people were self-medicating modernity and they needed to get sober. They needed some kind of a higher power, they called it. They got the idea from Jung. And this is pretty normal. There is a large return to religion amongst young people now. So quite, orthodoxy is quite popular. It's quite fashionable amongst young men, for example. And suddenly you see this amongst immigrants, for example, they're like, you'd expect the immigrants to get more secular in the second and third generation, but they don't. Like, they very much hang on to, for example, to Islam or Judaism or other religions, because they see that materialist modernity really offers. What does it offer? I mean, we're the most mentally ill, drug addicted and suicided culture that's probably ever existed. Like, that's the fruits of this culture.
Yeah.
Right. And there are exceptions. There are, you can look at examples around the world. I think maybe we should admit that it's just not fucking working.
Sorry, that's like a yeah. I mean, it's true. I mean, in class we see it all. We see it all happening.
What do you think? What do you think about this? This is one very one-sided conversation. What's your take on it?
I always find it very hard to generalize. I think the pleaser and also the element of really taking a stance in this I struggle with. I find it hard, but I do think we've lost a lot. And like you're referring back to the indigenous and the animist, I'm in Greece and I'm also deliberately searching for places. I was moving through Israel with my partner, and like the true connections with nature, like you're saying, and all these practices that are more embodied, we've lost it. And then there's this modern society of the phones and all the information, and it's more me. And students say, well, I pay for this, so I want a higher grade. That's
They
how
act
it
like
translates to the
consumers, right?
classroom.
Like they're trained as
Yes.
consumers. And I would deliberately say to my students, I'll say, I am your teacher, you are a student. Don't act like a consumer here. Don't act like an obnoxious Karen demanding, whatever. I say, you know what, you've paid your fee, and if you want to talk to customer service, if you're not getting what you pay for, if there's a problem, fine. But relate to me as your teacher, where the way of the sort of consumer culture teaches us to only relate as consumers.
Yes.
What's in it for me? What's the deal? What am I getting? And
Exactly.
it's one way of relating, and sometimes it's appropriate, but the whole world isn't a marketplace. We've turned the sort of marketplace into
Yeah.
the only paradigm that
Exactly.
makes sense. You
Yeah.
also mentioned some interesting cultures, like I've got Greek colleagues and this, one that's Greek animist and really into the Greek gods and this kind of thing. And then I've got Greek Orthodox friends. You also mentioned Israel, which is very interesting from this point of
Yeah.
view because it's not a secular culture. It's an ethnically not homogenous because there are, Arab Israelis, for example, but they're a minority. It's a bordered culture. And interestingly, it's one of the few Western countries that still has a birth rate. So most of the
And what rate?
a birth rate, they're still reproducing.
Ah,
So
okay. Yeah.
Western society, and that includes Asian countries like Korea, who are westernized, it's essentially a death cult. They're not breeding. So those
Mhm.
countries simply aren't reproducing. I mean, it's like animals kept in a zoo that won't mate. And Israel is actually one of the exceptions to that, which is interesting because they're a religious ethno-linguistic state, which is everything the Western cultures aren't allowed to be.
Yeah.
Right, like so since World War II, there's been a hypervigilance to boundaries, let's say. And I think that period is coming to an end now, where perhaps very rightly after World War II, we were very skeptical of extreme nationalism, of kind of ethnic identity. And that was, because obviously, I'll use British understatement, the Germans took it a bit too far. Right. So because there was these horrors of World War One and World War Two of nationalism and ethno-nationalism, particularly later on, there was a hypervigilance developed to that. But what that effectively meant was that it was a demonizing of very healthy things. So the idea of tribe as extended family, the idea of
Yeah.
land as being part of who you
Yeah.
are,
Exactly.
so even just right down to the sort of the masculine, the idea of men being good. Men are
Mhm.
absolutely one reason boys do terribly in school is because we have an incredibly feminized education system which doesn't suit boys. And then culturally we demonize maleness. So most school teachers are women, and then on top of that, they're in a sort of feminized culture that's demonizing men.
Can
And
work
that goes right.
because it's addressing this role model level that we have as educators also in the room, but it's attracting a lot of female teachers,
Yeah, and that's because,
especially.
women have a nurturing nature. Men do too, but women more so. I mean, just genetically, that would make sense given they have to be pregnant and breastfeed. And men, I'm old school. I don't think men can breastfeed. And just because of that sort of genetic basis, like women do have more of that nurturing nature. Though men, I also am a very nurturing person. And as a result, particularly if women don't have children, there's going to be more and more drawn in to be around children and education, which
Mhm.
is understandable. But boys really need male role models. I've found that role modeling is gendered. Whether I want, it's often why I have a female co-lead. Like if you've done KEC, one of
Yeah.
my courses, I'm working with Christina and there's other women I work with now. I nearly always have a female co-lead because I understand that I can't role model for the women in the same
Yeah.
way. And there's certain things
Exactly.
I'm just not going to get as a man. And yeah,
Yeah.
certainly for boys, it's the role modeling, but it's more than that. It's even around like boundaries. It's even around like masculinity, fierceness. You know, like boys are psychos. I don't know if you've met any little boys, but they just want to break things. Like they just
We're up
want
with
to.
three brothers, but
Yeah, okay. Like they just want to fight each other and break things and do dangerous stuff. I mean, they're absolute lunatics, you know? Like I look at my nephew, he just wants to fight me the whole time. And it doesn't matter how like peaceful hippie his parents are. He sees a stick and it's a sword, you know? So, and it's not that he's not nurturing too. Let's, you know, we can I don't have to be like I don't want to be like so old school here. You know, we can still he's got a sensitive side, but it's let's be honest, the kid's a little Viking warrior, so I think we should acknowledge that.
to be honest, I became a little one of that too. I love climbing trees and I love, we played around as well, me as a girl, because I grew up with boys. So I also think sometimes it's just what is role model, or, it doesn't always
I mean, it
come
is
from
definitely a
us.
degree of cultural role modeling, but the sort of the liberal worldview tends to overemphasize that because the sort of it's the blank slate theory, right? We're all sort of blank slates, and there's no, and that's just not true. Like, ask any parent
Mhm.
with two or more children, they'll tell you they're very different creatures.
Yeah.
Like the blank slate theory is kind of ruined education, I would say, and it's a nice dream, right? It's a very naive, nice dream. That,
Mhm.
you know what? Everyone's a blank slate, and we can just make everyone lovely and equal and the same. And that's just not true. Like
No,
I
but
think it's
why
time
should
to
we
admit
even
it.
want that? That's something, where did that thought came from?
What if preparing for the school year didn't mean over planning, but actually unlearning the rush? Release, Resource, Revive is a 3-day online retreat from August 22 to 24 for educators who want to start the academic year grounded, not depleted. Well, unplug from urgency, connect to what really matters to you to create focus and rituals for rest in your busy academic year to come. This isn't extra, it's essential. So join us at www.theembodiededucator.nl/online-retreat. Your nervous system will thank you. Now let's get back to this energetic, interesting conversation with Mark Walsh.
I
I
think,
think it came from the idea of wanting equalness
yeah,
and fairness, which is a nice drive, maybe, but it's not, you know, people aren't the same.
it is an element very much in the classroom that we're aware of, that I actually do notice that I was taught, make sure that everybody gets enough attention, and that because there are students, well, you
Yeah,
probably notice it too, ones that put up the finger all the time, they want to learn and they're eager, and then there's the quiet
yeah.
ones, so there's always this, I wouldn't say maybe battle, but the equality of dividing your attention and making sure you're checking in with each and every one, especially because you think, oh, that's easier for me, so
Yeah,
I'll
yeah.
come there a bit.
Yeah, no, I'm aware of that as a teacher. I kind of go, you know, let's make sure everyone gets a chance to ask questions. Or it's very cultural. If I had taught a group of half Americans and half Asians once, and the Americans asked 90% of the questions, even
Oh
though they're
yeah,
already
yeah,
half the group.
yeah,
So, you know, they were just putting themselves forward. It's like the
yeah.
squeaky wheel. And this is super cultural, like the Dutch kind of urge for equality is there. And Western culture traditionally has had two educational principles that could be called Greek and Christian. So Christianity is really about the fundamental spiritual equality of human beings and the shared dignity of human beings. It's why Christians ended slavery, for example. Other cultures don't believe that, okay? Other cultures do not believe in that. That's not a concept you'll get in many other cultures. It's a very European and Christian thing. And that's a beautiful thing for an educator to have, is a sense of the sort of fundamental dignity and spiritual equality.
Yeah.
But then we also have the Greek principle of excellence,
Okay.
which is the idea that some kids are better than other kids in certain activities, and they might, you know, they might excel in different ways in different places, but you know, they have some sort of excellence and competition. In its extreme form, the former leads to a kind of oppressive communism that cuts all the tall poppies down to the same level. And in the other extreme form, you get a sort of Nietzschean kind of far right
Mhm,
kind of
mhm.
Ubermensch competition kind of thing,
Yeah.
which is just
Who comes
brutal.
up with the most beautiful, the best?
Yeah,
Yeah.
and it's
Awesome.
like and that also decries the basic equality of people. So sort of Western culture is has always been has done so well, and it's such an excellent culture. No one ever says that, but it's such an excellent culture because it balances those two principles.
Huh.
And if you've ever been to countries that don't balance those principles, which is the majority, you'll go, oh, this is actually pretty horrific.
Yeah, yeah. And it also makes me think, because you're mentioning this Greek and this excellence, that there's also an element you said before, the good something and the beautiful, that there's also, because sometimes I miss beauty also in the classroom in learning, that it needs to
Yeah.
be efficient, it needs to be, that there's space for more that just soothes my being instead of it needing to produce or mean or create something more.
So let's come back to that. So I think it's the heart of what I'm saying. So the good, the true, and the beautiful. So the good, we've talked about the idea that we build virtue through practice. And actually the denial of the good just leads to evil. This is sort of postmodern idea of like, hey, no right, no wrong. Who am I to tell a child that what they're doing is bad? And that, again, it's maybe have a noble intention, but it just leads to bad behavior. It leads to worse people. So like, I think bringing back the idea of virtue is really important.
Yeah.
Truth as educators should be fundamental. So this is why I hate this phrase, my truth. It's a completely nonsense phrase. Like, you don't have a truth. You have a feeling, you have an opinion, but the truth is the truth. It's singular. So as educators, I think we do need to be committed to the idea of the truth. And we might have a perspective on it that might be biased, sure, but there's, the idea of truth being important as opposed to social truth. It's very fashionable to say there's 17 genders or whatever when there clearly isn't. And it's just bullied. This is one of the things, social truth is bullying people into saying things that are obviously not the case. And that's just a very feminine way of looking at the world, which is hey, we want harmony, and what matters is the sort of the opinion of the collective. And I don't want to get in trouble. And Mark, please don't talk about Hitler, because that's going to be awkward, and it's like, okay, but what's the truth? Right? Like I love the TV show from HBO about Chernobyl, because the Soviets would say, it's not politically correct to say our reactors don't work properly. So can you not mention that in the science? And they would cover up the science. And eventually, of course, that bit them on the arse hugely. And I think our society is somewhat like the 1980s Soviets at the moment, where there's a lot of things that are true that you can't say, that are uncomfortable to say. And people would say, in fact, you're bad if you say them. It's the return of morality via sort of social pressure. And the third element you mentioned there is beauty, which has gone out the window. Like, I don't know, Amsterdam versus Rotterdam. Like, modern cities are disgusting. Like, modernity is ugly. Modern art is disgusting, objectively disgusting. It's there to belittle the soul. The idea that beauty isn't important is so false. I mean, why do people from all over the world come to where I live now in Slovenia? Because it's beautiful. Secular people come to the cathedral and they sit there and they go, wow. And they might take a picture of their iPhone and make a selfie, but they understand it's something transcendent and beautiful. And certainly education should be including the beautiful, the aesthetic. And to deny the aesthetic is somewhat satanic in my view. When we see educational institutes that are made of concrete, that are sort of factory lines, that have no sense of beauty to them, something in the human soul withers. And that's part of our job as educators is to lean children towards the beautiful, for sure.
Yeah, I think that's a beautiful remark you just made. Yeah. And then you also mentioned, and I am intrigued with the middle part, the truth, like the comfortable and the uncomfortable, because in a way, I think as a teacher, an educator in our classroom, we also need to address the uncomfortable in the learning process. I think to talk about and experience and create a learning around where we're biased, I feel, and that is hold a lot in our bodies, right? Those biases, they show up. I'm curious, how do you look at that, and how could we work with that from a body perspective?
Yeah, I mean, understanding yourself is important, right? Like, we all have a bias towards certain things. So, for example, in a teaching team, I'll often co-teach with someone with a very different embodiment to me, just because they'll see the world very differently. Like, we use the 4 elements model, for example, and we won't never have 2 teachers with the exact same 4 elements mix. Cultural bias, I think, is massive. I mean, I'm from a cross-cultural family, I cross-culturally educate. I think that's really important to understand. And you'll hear people say like, oh, you can't generalize. Yeah, you can. That's what education is a series of generalizations that shouldn't be held to too tightly. We shouldn't hold those generalizations too tightly. When, you know, like Dutch culture is real, and you could fine tune that. You could say working class Rotterdam culture, right? You could get you could get more granular, but it's still useful to talk about Dutch culture and to understand one's cultural bias, understand the lens you're looking at through trauma. If you're looking through a survival lens, I think this is important.
Yeah,
Even understanding your mood, like my mood changes quite a lot, and I've even like all of psychology is an attempt to understand that, right?
yeah.
But sometimes I just think my brain's lying to me. I'm just in a good mood or a bad mood or whatever, right? It's like my girlfriend understands this with her cycle. She'll say to me, everything's wrong for the next 2 days.
Oh,
Don't
yes.
take it personally. That's just how the world look. I'm seeing through a lens of blood right now, you know?
I know.
Have this too, Liz?
I
Like
want
not
to
everybody
break up
does. But...
days. Yeah.
Yeah, so she's like, this is the lens I'm looking through. She's like, I really want a baby right now. Like, that's a major life decision, you know, but she understands she's just ovulating, right? So,
Yeah. Yeah.
though I forgot to have breakfast this morning. I realized I was moody, and it's like, hang on, you know, before this interview, I had like a load of fruit to get my blood sugar up because I was like, I just didn't want to bring like this negative, hungry lens to the interview, right? So I think understanding all these biases is part of embodied awareness, right? Is like
Yeah.
understanding these things.
Yeah. I think it really is. And we're not taught that way. And also how we're affecting others with it could help change a lot of situations in the classroom.
I mean, that's a really good question for any educator to ask us, what embodied state am I conveying?
Yeah.
Because I remember once I was going through Paris airport, and there was a woman so stressed, and she was screaming at everyone about where to go because the airport was busy and there was, you know, left or right. And she was dysregulating hundreds of people, maybe thousands in her day,
Yeah.
and she had no idea. She had no idea.
Exactly.
Or even like a waiter will really affect my meal. Like if the waiter's giving off a certain embodiment, a certain vibe, the kids call it vibe, right? It's
Yeah.
embodiment.
Yeah. That's
Like
the language. Yeah.
like we need to know this. Like if you like, how are you impacting your partner? Like
Hmm.
someone's not going to stay with you as a partner if you're constantly dysregulating them or depressing them or making them angry,
Yeah.
right? Like how are you influencing them? I mean, this is
Yeah.
like every teacher should understand when they're in a classroom of kids, what are they? It's usually down-regulation and up-regulation, right?
Yeah.
So a good teacher will understand this intuitively. You're calming the children down so they can learn. Okay,
Mhm.
kids, come on, settle down. Let's get on with the work, you know. Or
Yeah.
you're upregulating them if they're bored. Like, okay, so this is what happened in the 20th century. They make da da da. You know, you're upregulating them to get them energized. And
Yeah.
I used to work with kids in the Alps, and the French call these people animateurs. So the people who work with kids on the ski slope, they call animators,
Oh, that's
right? And
fantastic.
it's a
Yeah.
really nice term, huh? So
Yeah.
some teachers are better at up or down regulation. Some are like
Yeah.
the super calm teachers, welcome, you know, everything's relaxed. Come on, kids, it's gonna be fine.
Hmm.
And others like, hey, I'm the fun teacher. You know, they're
Yeah.
more like up regulatories. And these are embodied skills. And that's basically, as far as I can tell, most of what education is
Yeah.
balancing people within their window of tolerance with up and
Yes.
down regulation.
Yeah. It's interesting because I tend to be an energizer more, especially when
Okay.
teaching. And I work higher education, but
Yeah.
also primary education. And then naturally, it's the upregulation because I'm enthusiastic, I'm working, I'm
Yeah. Yeah.
connecting. So I need to work on my downregulation and finding flow sometimes to balance it out, right?
Right, particularly with certain groups, right? Like if you had a very group people who were very anxious about an exam, or they were
Exactly.
immigrants who were very, you know, traumatized, and they had a lot of
Yeah.
fight or flight going on, a lot of anxiety. You know,
Yeah.
that upregulation might not serve that group at that time, even if it's sort of well intended. I mean, we tend to be habitually either coffee or chamomile tea, is sometimes how I put it, right?
Mhm,
So
mhm.
as school teachers or, you know, any kind of educator, are you, you know, what do you want to be right now? Do you want to be coffee, chamomile tea, or LSD? You know, like which way do you want to go with it? So
Yeah. I'm
I
off the
use humor a lot when I
tea.
teach, right? For this, I use humor to break tension or to increase energy, or because I work with adults, you know, I might use quite a spicy, cheeky example, you know, and everyone sort of, you know, I'll say it's like a nipple becoming erect, and everyone goes, oh, and they wake up, you know, like all of a sudden their body
Oh,
smiles,
I
you
know
know.
how that looks like or feels like.
They're
Yeah.
like, oh, he's talking about nipples, what? You know? So this is, and it's again, that's a deliberate kind of upregulation strategy. So it's tone of voice, it's embodiment, it's the jokes you use.
Interesting. It's also for teaching something that we're actually not, well, we're not taught to think in that way, like you're just addressing. It's always still a little bit more in the, when your example of role model, you don't use that example. So
Well,
that's like,
it's information.
yeah. In the
Well, I mean, why not, right? Like, sorry, the signal went there. I mean, obviously, if you're working with children, there's a different level. Like, I might make a toilet joke, right? Like, there's jokes, there's age-appropriate jokes. I might make a joke about animal poo or some dog poo or duck poo or something. There's a great children's book about poo that children love because it's really funny to them, right? So you've got to have like the appropriate level. But if I'm working with adults, it could be something quite challenging or something quite saucy. Why not? Like, why not? Like this whole idea of don't offend anyone makes no sense to me.
And when you put yourself in that place, don't offend. And if we sometimes, I think, take a little bit more of a stance of navigating the uncomfortable, what is something that helps you to do that? Because it is sometimes armpit sweaty, under the boobs or somewhere like.
So I'm clear. What helps me navigate the uncomfortable?
Yes. Yeah, as being the one in the room. Yeah, I mean, for you, probably it's a pathway that's been run down.
Yeah, I mean, I've coached a lot of people pleasers, so like they struggle more with it. I mean, I think the fundamental I have self-regulation strategies like centering, which I teach all the coaches I train, for example. Basic self-regulation techniques. Maybe we'll do one in a minute. And the other one is I fundamentally don't think I'm responsible for other people's feelings.
Yeah.
I'm just fundamentally not responsible for them. Like, now I might be considerate, I might be respectful, right? But I don't think I'm ultimately responsible for your emotions. Like, let's say I said, I like Israel. Half the audience are going to get super triggered and half the audience are going to be like, yeah, great. So, okay, couldn't have been me responsible for their feelings because I said the same thing. But because people heard it in different ways, like they're going to have very different responses, right? So, I think really getting that you're not ultimately responsible for people's feelings, I think is a really important thing. And the other thing is there's a cost to not speaking the truth. Again, this is the Chernobyl series. What is the cost of lies? And to them, it was an exploded reactor and all this pollution. But actually, there's a cost in your embodiment to lies. Every time you lie or you don't say something that's true because it's not politically correct or it's not socially approved of, you get a bit weaker. You get a little bit more distant from your own soul, to be somewhat poetic. And I found over the years that the cost of not speaking the truth is so much worse than just someone getting annoyed with me or whatever. It's like, okay, fine, like, so what? Like, someone says they're offended, that doesn't actually do anything, right? It doesn't really mean anything. It's like, okay, you had a feeling. Well, you are an adult. That's okay. I'm going to take that into account, like I might be a bit more diplomatic around certain topics with certain groups. But ultimately, I'm like, cool, next. It's not relevant.
Yeah, and I'm thinking maybe because we're not used to or taught to learn to deal with those feelings and to keep them in or get them stuck, it also becomes these explosions that are maybe also out of place sometimes. So they are bigger responses for something that might be not need to be that uncomfortable if we're daring to speak the uncomfortable more often or explore it.
Yeah, let's look at it.
I think
You're right. So the explosive quality. So what's the wages of being a people pleaser, right? First of all, you don't have any real relationships because no one knows who you are, what you think, or what you like. Secondly, you will build up resentments. And those resentments will either come out slowly as passive aggressive kind of, seep out, or as you say, they'll explode one day, right? Like I don't explode at people because I'm saying what I think most of the time anyway. So it's like I don't have anything to build up. It's it's the quiet ones who are nice and want everyone to love them, which never works anyway because no one knows who you are, so they can't love you. So that's the wages of trying to be overly harmonious in that way. So everyone should be a bit more Dutch and rude and just say what they think, yeah.
no, I'm very curious how educators now will look in the classroom if they go with that. I'm looking at the timing. Shall we go towards the praxis and towards an ending?
Yeah, sure. So why don't we do a little kind of centering / meditation?
Yeah.
Sorry, the Wi-Fi seems to have gone a bit Not great.
Yeah, I know.
So let's look at 4 connections, right? So I'm going to guide people through a very short practice just for a few minutes.
Mhm.
And you could do like a whole bunch of practice on each one of these, but just a short one if people are sit comfortably. And, let's reconnect to our bodies. How do we do that? Feel your body. Real simple. Before we do any technique, notice how you are. And kind of notice what operating that you're running. Again, before changing it, like there's sometimes it's important to kind of get the message if you're angry or sad or, irritated or anxious or tired. It's like, okay, that's how I am. Maybe taking a breath and saying yes to however you are. Emotional state, physical state. If this is difficult, it's like, okay, are you cold? Are you tense or relaxed? What part of you is touching the ground or a chair? And then maybe scanning up and down so we're not missing any of the body. We tend to miss parts of ourselves. So taking just like 30 seconds to scan up and down the body to re-include all the little bits that have got forgotten. Reconnecting to your body. If it feels like you need a bit more balance, bringing some balance, some relaxation, if that's helpful. Maybe relax the mouth or the belly, or if you want to energize, take a slightly deeper breath. So we've got self-connection, but we're never alone. So you can think of someone who makes you smile. Obviously, if you're in good company, you can just look around at someone friendly, like Liz seems pretty friendly. Nice. Maybe there's a picture of my family over there. We could be a bit ancestorial, or your ancestors who want you to be well and live can have an image of them. For some people, it's almost like a leaning into that. Let's reconnect to nature. We tend to think we're separate from nature, but if you take a deep breath, you'll realize you're part of nature. Always giving and receiving oxygen and carbon dioxide. You're always in relationship. Maybe there's something resourcing in your environment, something beautiful we talked about today, something pretty in your environment. Maybe just look out the window at the clouds or any trees or plants in your room. Can really help our nervous systems to relax just to see a bit of green. Green or blue. Where is that green or blue? If there's not any green or blue or beauty in your room, you might want to redesign your room afterwards. And lastly, connecting to something bigger than you. Maybe there's a gesture. For some people, it's a prayer or a namaste. Maybe tuning into the deepest part of the body and asking yourself, what am I in service to right now? Yeah. Talked about decentering oneself today. What am I in service to? What's bigger than me that I can be of service to for the rest of the day? And if that's all too abstract, relax your eyes, relax your mouth, relax your belly, take a deep breath.
Thank you, Mark. It's always
You're
lovely
welcome,
to
Liz.
be guided for a moment. Not guiding.
Yeah, it's sort of halfway between a centering and a meditation. Centering is like a quick thing I'll do at a coaching session, for example, or teachers could do in a classroom, and meditation's a bit longer. This is kind of halfway between the two, maybe.
Yeah, it connected to a little bit more outside ourselves too, like
Cool.
beauty.
What else?
Yeah. So I have a question on operational language because that is a thing that stuck with me and it came up already in the conversation. Like, what in this can you maybe
Yes.
put an example onto of operational language? Because that's something I took from you, and I think it's important in embodiment world.
Sure.
Back to you. Yeah.
Yeah, this is something I got from Paul, and I think it's an upgrade for most embodiment teachers out there. So operations means the instructions of. So a lot of the language teachers will give in dance and yoga, and we are going to ruin most yoga and dance classes for people, is non-operational. So it's either an outcome like relax or empty your mind. That's an outcome, right? But
Yeah.
you can't give an outcome as an instruction. It's like if I say, be happy, Liz, you're like, well, how? So if you find yourself wondering how, that's because the operation is missing, the instructions are missing. So it's not that I mind metaphor. I think metaphor can be beautiful. But, like a Chinese Kung Fu teacher will be like, open your mind like a flower. They'll give you like a sort of beautiful, poetic, and
Exactly
it's
in
like,
that
wow.
tone.
Yeah, that's my Kung Fu voice. You like it. It's like Bruce Lee voice. Yeah. It's like, you must be like a finger pointing at the moon. So this can be beautiful. I'm certainly not against poetry. We can add poetry. But for example, just making it a visualization. If I say, imagine there's a flower in the center of your chest opening, that's actually operational. It's an
Hmm.
instruction. Or if I
Hmm.
say, bring your awareness to your breath as it goes in and out of your nose, that's an instruction for meditation that's operational,
Yeah.
right? If I
Yeah.
say, tense your abdominal muscles, then relax your abdominal muscles, right? So now I'm giving a bit of instruction. So the more operational instruction is, the more easily everyone can follow it. If you're trying to teach embodiment and you're just giving outcomes or metaphors, you'll just get a lot of confused people who are sort of trying to play along and they're sort of guessing at what the game is. And they might be able to guess, but they might not. So
Yeah.
particularly if you're working with kids or business people or groups who are a bit more kind of autistic or something, they need these like very clear instructions. But I actually think it's good for everyone. So now I've said this, notice in your yoga class tonight, listeners, like see if you can count how many non-operational and open your unicorn dolphin chakras to the universe, and you go, what the fuck do you mean? Right?
Yeah.
So I was just sitting in too many classes going, I don't understand.
Hmm.
And in traditional Asian teaching methods, it wasn't necessarily a problem if you've got 10 years, because you can kind of, if you've got 10 years, you can kind of work it out just through, like in Japanese method, it's just copy, 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 do, do, do. But most of us don't have 10 years to practice every day for an hour. Like there's guys in Tokyo practicing
Hmm.
Aikido every day for an hour before work, 5 days a week. And it's just what they do, and maybe they don't need such operational language because they can work it out the hard way. Just sort of discovery learning, right? But
Yeah.
I'd say it's a major upgrade for most embodiment teachers. And I said, I'm not against metaphor or I'm not against poetry, but
No,
you
both
should be able to
ends.
give clear, yeah, both and you should be able to give clear instructions and then add some beautiful poetry if you want.
Yeah. Yeah. No, I think it also made me more uh, efficient in a way because you help them have an experience and how to have an experience. And I can't put anything on the experience what it is, but you can guide them easier towards an experience instead of having them in the mind go like how, why, who, what, and then it comes to the
Yeah, I mean,
part. Yeah.
that's our job. I mean, embodiment is all about experience, but we guide people to experiences.
Yeah.
And it's sort of an ontological fascism to just demand people have an experience as well, right? Like you will be relaxed. We
Yeah.
have ways of making you relaxed. It's not very helpful, I think. And it's
Uh,
also not ethical, really. Like we can't demand people have a certain feeling. Like it always annoys me when I'm in a class, they're like, you are relaxed. And I'm like, I might not be actually. I've just come from
I
work and I'm
hate that too.
stressed.
When they put something on me, I'm like, go on
Yeah,
yourself.
Mike,
Wanna,
because your feeling is your feeling, right? This is where people get confused
yeah.
with truth,
Yeah.
right? Like you might not like the feeling of France, but that doesn't mean that France is Germany, right? So it's like that it's important that we honor the subjective and we don't confuse it with something that's more
Yeah.
external.
Yeah.
So we can give each their due, right? Like it's fair enough.
Exactly. Yeah, yeah, yeah. It is helpful, I think, to also for everybody in the classroom to work with children to think about that and to really practice. Practice. It's like the main word since you were my teacher. Practice.
That's the big one. People always ask me how to do things, and the answer is nearly always practice, right? Because it's like, again, back to what learning is. If what we're learning is a skill, the answer is always practice. Now,
Mhm.
intelligent practice, guided practice, role modeling is part of that, immersion, there's other aspects. But the key thing is practice. Like, I want to learn this relaxation technique. The problem is now people are looking on the internet for listening to 1,000 podcasts and YouTube videos or whatever, and then they're looking for the killer thing. And it's like, actually, it's more a matter of practicing some simple tools.
Yeah, yeah. What's the one that you keep on going back to for yourself? Is that the meditation, like you said, or what is your
Some kind of meditational breath work is pretty consistent for me. Some kind of movement. Um,
because you have a
yeah,
black belt in Aikido. How
I
often do you
do.
do that? How does
I
that?
don't do Aikido anymore. I'm sad. I can't make the Aikido club I want to go to. I teach on the same night, unfortunately. I'm quite missing that at the moment.
Oh, yeah.
But it's okay, at a certain point it's in your bones, but I certainly miss that practice.
Mhm.
I'm a bit of a connoisseur when it comes to Aikido, though. Yeah,
Mm.
nature connection, really. I
Yeah.
think for the last few years, I've realized that let's look at it this way, right? it's also your whole life. So let's say you have, let's say you live in a concrete building, you hate your job, and you're on your iPhone all day long. Okay. And then you go to the best yoga class in the world once a week. How much good is that 1.5 hours in yoga going to do compared to the other, however, what is that, the rest of the week, right? Let's say you
Yeah.
go 1 hour a day. You do 1 hour of really great yoga every day. That's 23 hours you're disembodied. So for me, it's more about designing my life around like, where do I live? How is my house? Do I walk along the river on the way to the gym? How am I in the gym? How's my relationship with my girlfriend? Like, how do we connect? What do we eat food at the table and turn our
It becomes
phones
a way
off?
of life,
Like,
right? It's not just
yeah, this is why it's not just like, if people are like, what's the best practice? I'm like, the best practice is the one you love.
yeah.
Like, if you love salsa dancing, go salsa dancing. If you love Aikido, do Aikido. I love lifting weights, I do that. It's like, the best practice is the one you love. And fall in love with your embodied practice. It opens up. And then, over time, you might want to look at how to build range and what are you missing. And like, I had to do some tango dancing after years of doing martial arts just to discover some sort of sexy aesthetic partner side that wasn't quite there in Japanese martial arts. So we can always open up other doors and broaden our horizons. But the best practice is the one you love. But the key thing I think there is, how you're living in harmony with your whole society, with nature, with your life. The fact they pop into the church on the way back from the gym to sort of top up on beauty. There's this beautiful cathedral on the way back from the
Mhm.
gym. I just sit there for 5 minutes and
Oh, yeah.
inquire. It's part of my like gym cool down. So but I'm not suggesting everyone should practice like I practice, because they're in, if you've got kids, if you live in a different country, there's a very different conditions people are in.
Definitely.
So I'm reluctant to sort of offer the killer practice. But for me, a lot of the time now, it's nature connection has become, just sitting in the forest yesterday. It's such a key thing for me.
Mhm. Yeah. For me, it's the sea and the ocean. And now I'm back in Greece and
Nice, nice.
swimming there and just being there, swimming, surfing, whatever.
Well, the environment's a big one, right? You're gonna really like, like I
Mm.
find, like, for example, Tel Aviv is so stressful and everyone's so agitated. When I'm there, it's just like, it's much harder than when I'm in Slovenia, for example. It's just a
Exactly.
different
Yeah. Some surroundings.
level of dysregulation, and there's
Yeah.
history behind that, obviously.
Yeah.
But yeah, yeah, makes sense.
Yeah. And maybe also for the educators, I think to bring it back to how in what state are they in during their days before they go to the classroom, when they enter the classroom, what happens there that you said before, right? And
What's the state of their nervous system they bring the children? Like, let's
yeah,
say you're a school teacher,
yeah,
right? How does your morning look?
yeah.
Like, is it that you wake up, drink a good cup of coffee, don't have breakfast, sit in traffic, and then you come into I remember my school teacher at secondary school, we called it form teacher. So you have a form teacher, does the register before you go to class. And he was clearly hungover every single day,
Mm.
and he was like barely awake. He was hungover, he wasn't really paying attention. He was a good guy, but that was the state he was giving 30 kids before they went to class. Do you know what I mean? He did that pretty much every day. If he wasn't hungover, he was clearly exhausted. Like, he looked terrible.
Yeah.
I can remember. I won't say his name. He was a nice guy. I liked him, but it was like, he was not awake in the morning even. So it's
Uh,
like, how was that
different
impacting those 30
disconnection,
children? Yeah,
dysregulation.
there was no
Yeah.
connection. There was no inspiration.
Yeah.
We had other teachers who were terrifying, and just in their class, you were just anxious the whole time. And this isn't about always being nice. One of my favorite teachers at school was just one who had really clear boundaries. He was quite firm, like, quite traditional British man, almost like military type, but he was firm but fair, and he had that sort of good boundaries. And I really liked that. And
Yeah.
I was quite a
Clarity.
wild kid, very boundary. And all the other teachers used to say, "Oh, how come you behave in his class?" I'm like, well, he's fair and he's boundary and he's masculine. And I just like that. That to me was the perfect embodiment when I was a wild 14-year-old who needed some structure. This is before I found martial arts and found that structure.
Yeah.
So, yeah, I mean, I just encourage listeners, I know it's difficult practically for a lot of teachers with class sizes and, marking. And there's so many practical challenges. I've
Oh,
trained a
yeah.
lot of teachers. So any school teachers listening, I'm certainly not criticizing. I know you're in a very imperfect system. Maybe take away some of this idea of your embodiment and how that's impactful. And ultimately, that's what people remember. I remember the teachers who were kind, who were well boundaried, who, had that discipline or had that warmth. And that's what I remember. I don't remember the teacher who said something clever.
No, right? That's the one who makes a connection and has an impact.
Yeah.
Yeah, that is the thing. Yeah. I think that's a good one to end with for me, as in my line of questions. If you're happy, Mark, yeah.
been a really nice conversation. It's nice to see you again, Liz. Appreciate being interviewed by someone who knows the work as well. It's really nice. And should I tell people where to sort of find me if they're interested
Please
in
go ahead.
our
That's
stuff?
always the last one. Yeah.
Yeah.
Tell them how they can find you and your work.
Okay, so the main thing we do is called the Certificate of Embodiment Coaching. So that's a 6-month training for coaches. We can find it online. We start in September. Pretty reasonably priced compared to some of the things out there as well. So just look up KEC, Certificate of Embodiment Coaching. We have a podcast called the Embodiment Coaching Podcast, a YouTube channel, an Instagram, so many other multiple books. The Working with the Body in Training and Coaching teachers would probably like as well. That one's pretty good for teachers. But the main one, if people want to train as a coach with us, just look us up. You'll find us online at embodimentunlimited.com, embodimentunlimited.com. All the links are there. There's my little pitch. Learn from the Americans how to do that.
Cool. Thank you very much. And I wish you a very good day in Slovenia and some more first bathing. Church.
Shalom, Efaristo, thank you, Val, and all the thanks.
All right, I'm going to push it here.
Awesome you stayed till the end. And for more awesomeness, please share this episode with a fellow educator who might benefit from this. And for even more awesomeness, we would love a review or stars in your favorite podcast app. And a little donation means the world to help more educators in the world beat overwhelm and bring more balance and aliveness to their classroom, teacher room, and living room. Thank you for being here and sharing more embodied sparks in education.